Bear with me. See if I can get this thing set up. Okay. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Oh. Uh-oh. Is this working?
So I don't see you. I don't know if you see me.
Uh-oh. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Oh, wait. Oh, shoot. Sorry. It can't... we can't activate the camera and Skype at the same time with the stream.
Oh.
It pulls on too many things. How are you doing, sir? Thank you for joining us this evening.
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Want to say anything to the chat real quick?
So this is the second year that I've at least seen a bit of the Mother's Love playthrough, and it's a pretty awesome thing. I think it's great that you guys are going through and playing through it for charity, and I'm happy to kind of hang out for a bit.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Man.
There's people off screen thanking you as well. Oh, we have an echoing voice though. Let's see. I'll adjust that real quick. One thing... you may be as surprised as we are, because after we talked this morning, just testing and making sure everything worked, we ended up receiving a massive donation basically saying, hey, we're pushing you over, we want you guys to do Mother 1 also. So we haven't even gotten to start Earthbound yet.
Yeah, actually, I saw that you were playing Mother 1, which, I mean, honestly, I've never actually played it. So I've seen bits of it, and I saw it years ago, but I never really played it much.
Hang on, we got a reverb that I gotta try and kill real quick. I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
Let's see if I can pull this away, and maybe that will tone things down a little. All right, but yeah, that totally happened. So we're almost kind of most of the way through Mother 1 now, and we'll actually hopefully get to start Earthbound soon. But yeah, Mother 1, it's a good time, but it's definitely a product of its time kind of thing. Not quite as timeless as the others.
How long does it take you to play through Earthbound 0 or Mother 1 or whatever you want to call it?
To be quite honest, this is only the second time I'm ever going to finish it. The first time took me about 12 hours. This time's going quite a bit faster.
Okay, so still not too bad. I mean, you finish up in 8 or 9 hours.
Yeah, and this one we actually have the benefit of Tomato's help, because it's got that easy ring patch that he put into it to reduce the grinding.
Okay, well that's good.
Yeah. So, we have a few questions we'd like to ask you, and of course the chat is more than welcome to feed in any questions that they would like. If you have anything, I don't know, just any burning questions or anything like that.
Yeah. So the one thing real quick is, should I go ahead and fire up the site that you guys are on, the Twitch channel, so I can actually see the chat? Or
oh yeah, absolutely.
Let me actually do that, just because I wasn't sure if there was any way that if I had it going, it could create any weird problems. But let me.
Yeah. We still got some reverb. I'm trying to squash that as well as I can.
Okay. I don't know if this is going to make a difference when I go in and see the live feed.
Yeah, I mean, so actually you'll probably be able to see yourself on the feed now, just like maybe 30 seconds behind.
I think I've got to sit through a commercial probably at some point.
What's up? What was that?
Oh, I just have to watch a commercial before I see anything on your feed.
Yeah, the Twitch ads. Twitch got to get their dollars.
So, yeah, there it is. I think that's hopefully all working now.
I think we are.
All right. Well, okay. So, one burning question that I actually had that I've been wondering about for a while. Actually, someone else brought this up earlier too. Was it your idea to change the octopus statues and the doll statues to the pencil-related stuff in Earthbound?
So this is funny. So now I've got like really weird delay.
Oh no! Oh right. Are you listening to the stream instead of the Skype?
Yeah, I think this stream is on now. So let me mute the stream.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me actually turn on the make sure that I can see the Skype. Okay.
Technical difficulties. It's always part of the fun.
Yeah. Anyway, so you were asking, was the octopus and the pencil and all that kind of stuff changed because of stuff that I did? You mean?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had any involvement in the change of that, or if that was something.
Yeah, that actually was like one of the things that, I mean, I ended up most of that kind of stuff I was involved with. In fact, probably all of it, just about. When I first started working on the project, there was lots of things that when I went through and looked at the content and looked at the artwork and various things, you know, we knew that there were a set of guidelines that Nintendo of America needed to follow. Things like, you know, no crosses and religious iconography and no booze and all that kind of stuff. And so anyway, as a part of all of that, then if there was a change that needed to be made because of, you know, just something being too strange for the American audience, we figured, then yeah, I was involved in making that change too. So with the pencil eraser and the eraser, that was something that I definitely ended up. I don't remember if I made the decision to go with the pencil eraser. I'm pretty sure that I did, but it was actually because me and the Japanese translation director that I was working with really closely, we did a lot of stuff that was very, you know, we would go back and forth about all kinds of stuff. And I think, and I can't remember if he's the one that suggested the pencil eraser or if I did. And then, to be honest, the eraser part was the harder one, just because I wanted something that kind of was tied to the pencil eraser. But yeah, in the end, you know, it was all based on discussions that we had, and they went ahead and made the change to the artwork just because the metal octopus and the Kokeshi doll were pretty strange for American audiences, I think.
I was gonna say I would definitely have been confused by that first time through, especially as a kid. Just like, what is this odd doll thing? What is that?
Yeah, the Kokeshi doll especially is very Japanese, but yeah, I mean, even just the octopus and the Kokeshi doll are kind of weird, even for Japanese audiences to some degree. I mean, they don't really have any deep meaning. They were just kind of an odd thing that I think you threw in, just, you know, for kind of weird, jokey things on the Japanese side.
Okay, all right. Well, that's very cool, and I think that also sort of ties into the next question, which came from someone earlier. To what degree do you believe in the notion of transcreation, which I guess it means the idea that localization is sort of a creative product?
That's a good question. I mean, it's certainly a creative thing, just because, I mean, even though everybody that translates something works from the same base, it's still got a lot of, I think, creativity, especially in the case of Earthbound. It was a creative venture for me just to a lot of times come up with things that either were very quirky and strange, because that was pretty much what they asked me to do, to sort of preserve the feeling of the Japanese version. I think in some cases I probably went weirder than they were in Japanese in some ways, but you know, at the end of the day, what I ended up putting in, I know is different than what anybody else would have done. So it is a creative thing, and I think that, you know, looking at any localization effort that is made, two different people that are doing a localization of a video game or a movie or whatever, each one is going to have their own special way of sort of translating things. In my case, it wasn't just a straight translation, though, too. It was a matter of making alterations to try to fit the North American market, where a lot of things in the Japanese version, of course, were made to fit the Japanese market. So, yeah, it's a creative thing. I mean, there's no way you can get around the fact, though, that obviously this is all based on Itoi's writing, and he's really a fantastic writer, and his story and everything in it was, you know, unusual and awesome, and all of that stuff is all his work. But yeah, I mean, I got to put a lot of the stuff that is a lot to me, sort of from a growing up in America standpoint, and I got to put it in, and I know that other people would have had a different take on some of those lines and things like that.
I can understand that, and especially just in terms of, like you were saying, working under the writing of Itoy. I imagine that may weigh a little bit heavier when you're working on someone who is a recognized author, and it's not just, hey, here's this brand new name making their first game kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the whole thing, you know, working with Itoy is, I mean, I think that he was sort of unfettered with, you know, being able to kind of do things that, you know, it's almost like he didn't know any better that, you know, in video games you don't normally do. And so I think he did stuff that was very special and very unusual for the time, and still to this day, obviously, with all the people that think as much as they do of Earthbound, it's proof that it's been, you know, a long well, what's the word I want? It's a game, and it was a, you know, a way of making a game that ended up having really long legs. I mean, this is, you know, to me, the fact that it's almost 20 years that it's been around is sort of shocking.
That's true. I mean, it's become sort of I guess just a touchstone, a cultural, it's something to be remembered.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty neat how so many people have, you know, played the game for the first time in the last couple of years because it was re-released and everything. But, you know, I always like to read about the fans that played it, you know, years and years ago, and sort of the nostalgic kind of feeling that they have for playing the game. And, you know, because for me, when I worked on it, I mean, there weren't a lot of people that played it. So, you know, it's always nice to hear people that did play it back in the day.
Fair enough. I saw something scroll by in the chat a minute ago I really liked. Let me see if I can grab that real quick.
Yeah, sure.
I have a question real quick. How'd you go about some of the food-related items? Because on the stream over the past couple years, I've cooked some of the odder foods that have been in Earthbound, like the peanut cheese bar, or, you know, more infamously, the trout-flavored yogurt. How much leeway did you have with those kind of names? Like, what was the thought process to localizing that?
So, I mean, it's kind of funny. We, you know, at times I sort of remember back to the work we were doing, and, you know, it was me and, like I said, the Japanese translation director. And then, you know, we would also get some input from a couple of other guys. There was a guy who was a editor at Nintendo Power who kind of helped out with naming some of the objects and things like that. And then there was a guy named Dan Osen who has done other localizations and things like that on games at Nintendo for a lot of years. And he came in and kind of helped with some of that stuff too. But he had started doing the translation work and kind of did just he did localization work on just what was going to be a sort of a small demo for the, you know, like the North American executives. And so he did that, and then when it became greenlit or whatever you want to call it, then I took over the project. And so I ended up doing, you know, whatever was left, 90% of the text localization and things like that, with, you know, the guy from Ape. His name was Masayuki Miura, and so Miura-san and I we were the ones that got to do most of it. So, but yeah, you know, the leeway we had, it's pretty amazing because Miura-san let us really kind of go crazy. I mean, he didn't sit back and say, you know, no, that's too weird or too, you know, odd or whatever. I think they really trusted us to kind of be able to tell what would fly, you know, well with an American audience and what might end up, you know, not sounding quite right. But we had a lot of leeway, I think, in the end. Although, you know, we did really want to respect Itoi's writing and the things he did. So we did spend a lot of time, you know, trying to come up with something that was right for the game and for North America, but still keep as much of Itoi's flavor as we could.
It's very cool. I'm glad they gave you guys that amount of freedom too. That's pretty fantastic that you're not so tied down by the rules, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so the one thing that I think is easy to sort of forget is that, I mean, this was, like I said, almost 20 years ago, and you know, there were no like policies for how to do this stuff in those days. We had very few tools. We didn't really have a lot of things that sort of helped us along the way. These days, I think the localization team at Nintendo is so much more sophisticated than we were. We had so much to do with, and it ended up just being this sort of brute force methodology of, going through reams of paper, and we printed out every bit of text in the game, and we would just go through and like write in, what we were thinking would be the right thing. And the translation that because we did actually get a first translation. Keiko Tamura was a translator on staff at Nintendo of America, and she did this huge job of just sort of doing a rough translation of everything. And then I would go through and I would look at everything and decide if it sounded like it was good or not, in terms of what was sort of going on in the scene, or whether it would fit for the American audience, or whatever. And then if I needed to get context and stuff, I would talk to Miura-san, who would tell me what was going on for that line and what you would see on screen, because most of the time I couldn't ever play the game and see anything. I was just working on paper.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because the game was broken early on. I mean, when I say broken, I mean it's because we were changing artwork and things like that, the game wouldn't run. So for a long time, probably at least the first 2 months, we didn't get to play the game at all. And so it was all just looking at lines on a piece of paper. And consequently, that's kind of why when I see people play the game and I look at the text these days, there are times when I look at it and I think, oh man, that stuff just didn't fit together, because the lines didn't necessarily appear right next to each other in the actual code, if you will. So sometimes lines would be separated, and I didn't know that they were supposed to fit together, and so they sound kind of strange together sometimes. But like I've told people, the lucky thing is because the game's odd, I got away with a lot of that kind of stuff.
It still fits the theme, but
yeah.
So basically, I'm just imagining the early work is kind of one of the those big tooth binder clip things holding together stacks of paper, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean the stack of papers, if I remember right, was I think the stack of papers that we printed out had to be close to, I don't know, it was at least 8 inches tall. I mean, it was a big ream. It was at least, I think it was at least 1,000 sheets. I mean, it was a huge stack, and it basically we just kind of cranked through it as fast as possible. And that stack of paper, you have to understand, wasn't all just lines of dialogue. It also had a lot of just sort of characters that are messed up, that don't mean anything for the game itself. It's just in the code. And so, but in the middle of all of these sort of character strings and stuff, you'd get lines of actual dialogue. And so then those are the things that we would actually update, and Miura-san would actually type it back into the code, and then it would get compiled and actually put in the game, and that's the way it would work. But yeah, so poor Miura-san really was doing a lot of data entry as well.
I was actually very curious, when you're writing stuff like that, how long did it take to see it in some context in the game?
Well, like I said, really, I mean, I started, from what I remember, I think I'd started really working in earnest after Christmas of '94. So, like early January, I started writing, and I probably didn't see anything in the game that I had written until probably early March, something like that. And then for a while in March, I do remember that we were only able to play up until about the boogie tent part, and then it would crash and you couldn't get past it. And so then for a number of probably 3 weeks, we couldn't get past the boogie tent. And then finally in April, we started getting builds that got us farther in, but it was getting really late, and the testers, I know, were pretty stressed out about it. And at the end of the day, it worked out. But yeah, we didn't get to see stuff on screen for quite a while.
It's pretty impressive that everything went as well as it did.
It is. I mean, I'm shocked at times. I still can't believe, like I said, the fact that it's played 20 years later just because it came out as well as it did, I'm happy about. But thinking about sort of the difficulties we had and all of the hurdles to overcome and just the large amount of work that we had to do in a fairly short amount of time, yeah, I'm kind of shocked that it worked out the way it did.
Okay. Well, I had something else lined up, but I think you may have just answered it. Was going to say, I'm sure a lot of people in the chat know of the unfortunately canceled plans to publish Earthbound Confidential, and if you could tell us anything about that or share any stories. But I think you just shared a story pretty much.
Well, yeah. So what sucked about that whole thing, really, in a way, was I guess I sort of underestimated. Well, let me put it this way: I didn't know that EB was going to get re-released. So because I don't work at Nintendo anymore. I haven't worked at Nintendo since '95 or '96 or whatever it was when I quit. And so I didn't think it was ever going to get re-released. And I thought, nobody at Nintendo really cares about Earthbound that much. And then I found out later that I was wrong and that they actually were going to re-release it, which certainly is nice. But doing the confidential thing. Well, actually, I'm trying to remember the timeline. Did I actually do that after it got announced? In any case, I thought that they didn't really think about it that much, didn't care about it that much. And then I went over and talked to a friend that still works at Nintendo from when I was there all those years ago. And, and I thought, well, it'd be kind of nice if maybe Nintendo wanted to, do something or would at least give me permission to go ahead and do this and not worry about Nintendo coming back later and saying, no, you can't. Because I was going to do a Kickstarter and offer, a book about, localizing Earthbound and lots of the lines and some of the hidden meanings, if you will, or some of the motivations behind the stuff that I wrote. But what ended up happening is, the marketing department at Nintendo apparently didn't want me to do it. And so they asked me, they just said, we'd like you not to do it. And, just the fact that my career in video games started at Nintendo, I sort of felt like I needed to at least respect their wishes, I guess. And so I shelved the whole plan, and which was kind of too bad. I would have liked to have gotten some of that stuff down on paper, but that's kind of the way it goes. And like I said, I think I still sort of feel like I owe Nintendo a fair bit, for the fact that I've had at least a reasonably long career in video games. And so I guess I wouldn't have felt right if I just would have sort of ignored their wishes.
Fair enough. And you definitely don't want to, well, not quite bite the hand that feeds you, but you don't want to disrespect the people who really kind of helped you get on your way.
Yeah, and Earthbound, it's a game that I'm hugely fortunate to have had a chance to be involved with at all. And because I'm so, involved now with some of the EB community and things like that, it would be bad if something threatened that, like if Nintendo came back to me and handed me a cease and desist letter and said, you can't talk about working on Earthbound anymore. So I'd rather be able to do this kind of stuff and talk about it and, answer questions for people and do that kind of thing. But I don't know. As much as I would have liked to, I decided it probably was better not to.
Certainly. And again, we can't thank you enough for just all the involvement you have with the community, and I mean, even now with Mother's Love and stuff like that. It means a lot to all of us to hear these little stories.
Well, I like I said, I'm just grateful that you guys play the game. I'm grateful that you've enjoyed it over the years, and doing this kind of a charity event is testament to what good fans the game has. I mean, you guys have been really the thing that kept the game going all these years, and it's awesome that a lot of people may have played it for the first time in the last couple of years, but it's really an amazing community. I mean, Earthbound fans are like no other, and in the video game industry, it seems like people know that, and they know that the fans are passionate and care about the game, and yeah, it's a huge deal.
Related to general game development and Kickstarter, of course, a few months ago you were raising money for your new game, Robot Apocalypse, and unfortunately that didn't quite reach its goal.
Yeah.
Is there any chance we'll be seeing that again in the future? And can you tell us any more information about that?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, no, we're the Kickstarter campaign. I mean, it wasn't a major shock that it didn't do as well as we would have liked in some ways. It's a free to play game that's going to be on Facebook, and doing a Kickstarter for a free to play game has generally not been terribly successful for anybody, and we kind of knew that going into it, but we sort of figured it was at least worth trying, and it was a good thing for us to do just to push forward development of the game. We did keep working on it, and we're actually getting pretty close now to hopefully doing a closed beta in the next, hopefully a few weeks at the very least.
Oh, excellent.
So yeah, the game is progressing, and we're getting pretty close to a point where we can do, I think, all of the sort of main features we wanted in the game are going to be present. You can play kind of doing everything we intended for the base game. These days with games, it's so different than it used to be, because once you launch a game, it's not the end of the work you do. It's a lot of times just the bare beginning of things. And so, we know that we need to have a sort of core bit of gameplay that lets you do, a number of things, but we're going to keep adding stuff over time. And so the game, hopefully, like I said, is going to be in a closed beta with like real players pretty soon. And I'm really hoping that if everything goes well, that not horribly far after that, we can open it up for live play on Facebook, and anybody that's got a Facebook account could always give it a try.
Cool. I'm very excited.
Awesome.
I usually kind of shy away from the free-to-play stuff, but everything you guys were showing us about that looked pretty amazing. Very sort of a StarCraft-looking thing almost.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that we're doing that's different than most other free-to-play games is we have actual, what we call synchronous gameplay, where if I'm online and you're online, we're fighting just like we would be if you were playing StarCraft or whatever, and it's two live people actually doing, combat against each other. And you're controlling your units and moving them around. It's not as big a fight as what you get in like StarCraft and things like that. It's a smaller number of units. So in that way, it feels a bit like a MOBA almost. Certainly not Dota or League of Legends or anything like that, but it's got sort of, MOBA-ish bits, because you're just controlling a smaller number of units that, in our case, you've kind of designed and customized to doing things the way you want. And so yeah, I mean, we are quite a bit different than a lot of the free-to-play games, and one of the big things for us is just to make sure that everybody understands that you don't have to pay anything to play the game. You can get all the content. It's just, for us, the only way that we would make money are for those people that want to throw in money just to speed up things. And so beyond that, you can play the game all for free though.
Excellent. Well, that sounds fantastic, and
yeah. So hopefully we'll be putting up an announcement, at least on a Kickstarter page for anybody that did back us. They'll see it. So I know you did, Vids, which thank you for the.
I was gonna say, don't forget about us when beta time rolls around.
Yeah, I know. You should get a note, because I'll put it up, and once I put the note up, it should come into your inbox and everything, and we'll start with like a very small number of people playing, just to make sure that we're not crashing badly, and our network setup is all working okay, and then slowly add more people until we get to the point where it's ready to launch on the general public, and cross our fingers and hope that nothing really blows up when that happens. Well, if it did blow up, I suppose that's not a horrible problem, but at the same time,
it's not the worst problem to have.
Well, it isn't, but in a way it is a pretty bad problem, just because people, sadly, you get one chance a lot of times to keep people playing a game, and if it doesn't work well for them the first time, they'll hardly ever come back. So we need to keep it going as well as possible. So
Definitely.
Oh yeah.
Related to that, is there any advice that you could give to independent developers aiming to get their games kind of out there and seen for the first time?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, there's so many things going on these days in the game business that really is new and different than what it was years ago when I was first starting out. Getting people to try your game and to see it and stuff like that. There's there's I think two main thoughts about this. You know, these days you either decide to go ahead and launch something as a free-to-play game where people can donate a bit or whatever, or you go ahead and make it a premium game where you're charging some amount of money. I think that when you go premium, the thing you've got to do is make sure that your game has, you know, what they call sort of a unique selling point, something that really draws people in. You know, interesting artwork, some, you know, game mechanic that you don't see very often, some twist on a different game style or whatever. With a good sort of unique selling point to your game, then I would go to like YouTube people and see if you can get a few YouTube, you know, reviewers to play your game, because, you know, that's the democratization of the game industry these days. YouTube people, Twitch channels, you know, things like that are all hugely important, I think, for independent developers. And just because, honestly, you know, writing an email out of the blue to the big video game websites or whatever, odds are they're just going to kind of pass you by, sadly. But with, you know, YouTube people and stuff, it's a lot. I think you've got a lot better chance of sort of getting somebody to look at your game, get interested in it, and, you know, hopefully do a review or play it, or, you know, whatever, do a let's play, whatever you can get. You know, you just kind of need to get your game out there for people to try. Then that's why we went with free to play, because we wanted as low a barrier of entry as possible to get people to try our game, and that's, you know, that's the route we took. And we think that it works well for the design that we have, but it doesn't necessarily work that great for every game design. So I think you have to kind of sit down and look at what you've got and decide, you know, is my game going to work okay in the free-to-play arena, or is it something that really, you know, I want to put out as a premium game and charge $2, $3, $4, whatever. So that's it. It's a hard decision to make, though. I mean, I know a lot of indie developers struggle with what kind of business model should I go with, and you know, there's no real magic bullet here that and good advice I can tell somebody this is the way you should do it for sure. But it really is a situation now in the game industry where you've got so many more options than what we had 10, 15 years ago. I mean, you know, it was big publishers and magazines, and that was all we had, especially, you know, when Earthbound was being made. You know, we had game reviews done in magazines, and we, you know, we were the publisher of the game, you know, but Ape was somebody that was working with Nintendo, and that was the business model that everybody worked under. You worked with a publisher, they published it, magazines would write an article to review it, and all the other bits of the game industry, whether it was mobile games at that time or a little after, I guess, to, you know, other fringe sort of games, you know, downloadable stuff and things like that, they were all very much sort of outside that core bit of the game industry. And so, you know, for independent developers now, it's kind of a nice thing to have so many options and so many ways to get attention, but it's tough because it's competitive. There's a lot of people out there. A lot of people want to try to get their game made.
It's just a big, busy world right now. Because, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it is.
Well, thank you very much.
No, not a problem. So I don't know if anybody had any questions. I haven't really been looking at the feed and the questions that might have been asked. I don't know if anything came by that you guys saw.
I saw one that was interesting. It was that a couple people had. It was, and I don't know if you asked this because I had to go to that for a second. Knowing how much wider the knowledge of the Japanese culture is today and everything, and how more people have like started to, like, you know, fan base around it. Is there anything you would like change with the localization decisions based on like how much more, I guess, widely accepted it is today? You know what I mean? If that makes anything.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. I mean, you know, the one thing, you know, my experience when I was doing the localization, I definitely was coming from kind of a bit of a strange place, because I had lived in Japan for 4 years, so I was pretty well aware of Japanese sort of odd culture bits, and things like that. And so the time that I spent in Japan gave me at least a sort of an understanding of some of that stuff in Japanese culture. And so based on what I had from living in Japan and then doing the localization, I wasn't sort of doing it from a straight up standard American male point of view. I kind of was doing it from a sort of a weird blend of, some Japanese background as well as, what it meant to be American and things like that. But yeah, I don't know that I would change a ton. The one thing I would do is I would just want to clean up some of the clunkiness of it. Because like I said, there are just times when the sentences don't flow together very well, and it just kind of drives me crazy when I see them. But as for the cultural angle and the jokes and things, I don't think I would change a ton of it. Not really, anyway.
Okay. All right. Okay. Very cool. Let's see. Got way too many tabs open. What sort of non-video game related projects have you worked on in localization or otherwise, I suppose?
Well, actually, I haven't really. I mean, I've been in video games I started working at Nintendo in 1990, and I've never worked for any other company on anything that was not sort of video game based. The one thing that my company that I own, me and two other guys I work with, we're co-owners of our company, and we actually have two companies technically. One of them is the company that we publish games under, and then one is a company structure that we have for doing consulting work. And the consulting company, at one point, we did work with, and I don't even remember what it was like a pharmaceutical or Johnson & Johnson or somebody, and we were sort of working sort of in a roundabout way for them to try to create a sort of 3D graphical interface for that would allow them to sort of do these virtual meetings and various things like that. And that's probably the only project that I can think of that we've ever done that was less about video games and more about productivity or something like that. But other than that, it's pretty much always just been video games.
Okay, and I even think about it on some level, making an interface like that, bringing people together, it's almost like a game in its own sort of way.
Yeah, it had a lot of things in it that were very video game like, and what's funny is it actually was a full 3D environment where there were actual people that would figures that would walk around and interact and things like that in this three-dimensional world, and they were building it on Unreal. Well, at that point, I guess it would have been Unreal 3. But yeah, it being built on a game engine, it had a lot in common, to some degree with just sort of a basic 3D, first-person shooter kind of thing. Without the shooting.
I think I'm imagining something similar to a much nicer looking Second Life.
Yeah, a bit like that. Yeah, but they had the ability to do things like sort of create these virtual meetings in a big room where you had a screen, and then they would be able to start up like a presentation on the screen, and you could embed it inside of this 3D world. So it was kind of an interesting thing. We didn't work on it for real long. We only worked on it for probably a few months, and I don't know whatever happened to it, if they ever used it or not. I mean, obviously, if it's an internal tool, and we're not Johnson & Johnson, so we're not privy to what goes on there. But yeah, it was kind of an interesting system, but not really games. Like I said, first-person shooter minus the shooter, I guess.
Someone in the chat just mentioned something. I'm not sure if you're familiar with a book called Ready Player One, but it almost sounds sort of like the Oasis system from that. Very much a shared virtual reality sort of situation.
Oh, okay, yeah, that probably is pretty close to it, yeah.
Well, we don't want to keep you too late, because, I mean, I understand you've got things to do, and we very much appreciate that you were able to spend some time with us and just tell us all this cool stuff. But do want to ask one more quick question.
Ahead of you, right?
What's up?
You've got a lot of gameplay ahead of you too, right?
Yeah, that's definitely a thing.
So are you going to actually finish? You're going to finish Earthbound 0 and then play all of Earthbound without sleeping. Is that right?
That's the plan. I'm pretty sure emergency services are on speed dial.
Okay, well, good luck. I hope you don't collapse, and you guys need to just, kind of pace yourselves, but
Well,
hurry as much
we
as
got the
you can.
noodles for that tomorrow.
Okay. Well, I'll check in every once in a while. I'll just kind of, throw the site up and kind of take a look and see how you're doing.
Cool. Well, it's all right if I ask one more question before you go.
Yeah, no, sure. I'm good. So yeah, whatever you need.
All right. Just last thing. Aside from Earthbound, what's your favorite thing you've ever worked on?
Aside from Earthbound, the favorite thing I ever worked on. Well, it's kind of funny. I mean, there's a lot of different titles that I worked on that, sometimes I part of my career I worked as a producer on the publisher side, so I would work with developers remotely. And on the publisher side, you're the person that basically is approving whether or not they get paid, and dealing with the legal department, doing the dealing with the QA department to make sure that everything is coming along, with the game that way. You do sort of work with the developer to some degree on ways they can improve the game, but you don't want to go too heavy on that because you can derail the game really easily if you're like there are some producers on the publisher side that have a problem with that and make all kinds of problems for their projects. But one of the games I worked on that I enjoyed a fair bit, even though it didn't quite come out quite the way I was hoping in the end, because it got a little too complex at some point. But I worked on Evil Genius. I was the producer on the publisher side for Evil Genius, and so that one was quite a bit of fun. And it's funny, there's bits and pieces of games I've worked on where, we'll do something in a system that we thought, gee, maybe that would be kind of cool, and it came out and it worked really well. And so it's funny, I think there's parts of games that I've worked on that I really enjoyed. I worked on a game that unfortunately got very little attention as well, that was a sequel to the Die Hard trilogy game that was out for PS1 and stuff a long time ago. And so the Die Hard Trilogy 2 was something I worked on. I was at a developer in Florida for a couple of years, and there were a few things that we did that at that time I thought were pretty cool. I mean, we did things like when you would walk down hallways and stuff in the third-person version of the game, you would get into different trigger boxes that would change the audio to being, different ambient tones and things like that. And, and this was back in '98, so, it was early on to be doing some of that stuff. And so like I say, there's little bits and pieces from various games that I worked on that, I definitely liked a lot. As an overall project, nothing is probably ever going to touch Earthbound is sort of the way I think about it. But, there are bits and pieces of other games I've worked on that I liked quite a bit. And yeah, and Evil Genius was a lot of fun too.
Well, I gotta say, I'm actually really happy that you brought up the second Die Hard trilogy game, because I have a fondness in my heart for both of those games. They were
really?
They were a little
Well,
janky in places, but they did a lot of cool things that no other games were doing at the time. There was three games in one, basically.
Well, the thing that was hard about, like when we did the sequel, it was a game that had a driving portion. It had a first-person shooter. Not a first-person shooter, but more like a light gun shooter kind of portion, and then a third-person action-adventure kind of gameplay style. And so what we did in the second one is we tried to make a story where you would interweave all the different types of gameplay. And so, because when the first one came out, you would play one style of game, one through 6 levels, and just go through those 6 levels all the same style, and then you'd play the next one. It was all driving, for example, or all the light gun shooter part. And what we did is we tried to make this story where it would intersperse the different styles of gameplay. And so that was the thing that made our version a little different. And it was actually kind of hard to do just to make it interesting and stuff. But yeah, I'm glad you played it if you did, because I don't know that many people did. So.
It's unfortunate because they're both pretty cool.
Well, that's good. So, yeah. So anyway, yeah, that game had a few things that I was pretty proud of that we did. Overall, like I said, I wish it would have done better, but it's kind of the way it goes.
Awesome. Well, all right. Like I said, I know it's getting late. Don't want to keep you too long. So, thank you very much for joining us and just talking with us and answering some questions and telling us good stories for a while.
No, that's my pleasure, and you know, like I said, I hope you guys do all right tonight. Drink lots of coffee, whatever it is you take, you know, Red Bull, I don't know, something like that.
Last year, we actually got a voice clip from someone in the chat that simply said, "Be sure to drink lots of water every day." And I think that's something very important for us right now.
Yeah. Well, so like I said, I'll check in. You know, definitely in the morning my time. I'll log in and see how you guys are doing. But good luck tonight. I hope the game goes well and hurry through all the big fights.
Will do. Thank you very much, sir. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
Thank you, Mr.
Good
Man.
evening.
Not a problem. Take care, you guys. I will talk to you again.
Yep.
Right.
Talk to you soon. Marcus Lindblom, everyone.